There is a saying in the intelligence community that the loudest threats are rarely the most dangerous. The quiet ones are the ones that kill you. In markets, we are trained to chase noise. We wait for the big green candle that looks like a rocket launch. We wait for the violent red crash that feels like the world is ending. We look for volatility because volatility makes the danger obvious. But right now, if you look at silver, you see something that does not look dangerous at all. You see a price that keeps getting pulled back into the same zone, like it is stuck in wet concrete. It dips, it snaps back, it rallies, it stalls. It looks boring, even disappointing. And that is exactly why you should be paying attention. Because when a market goes quiet, while the engine is screaming, it usually means somebody very large is doing something very deliberate. And in silver, the engine is the delivery system. The paper price can pretend everything is fine right up until the moment it cannot. That moment is what we are walking toward. This is a story about COMEX delivery panic. It is about a door most people do not even know exists. The exit door. The door the shorts use to get out of trouble. The door the system uses to relieve pressure without moving the headline price. The door that turns what should be a physical problem into a paperwork problem. And the warning sign this week is simple. That exit door is closing. So in this investigation, I'm going to do 4 things. First, I am going to show you what the tape is saying and why a flat price in a high volume environment can be one of the most bullish signals on earth. Second, I am going to explain the plumbing behind COMEX delivery and what it means when the metal that should be available suddenly becomes unavailable. Third, I am going to connect that plumbing to real-world bottlenecks that are tightening the physical market. And fourth, I am going to give you a simple set of tells you can watch this week so you can see whether the door is still open or whether it just slammed shut in real time. One more thing before we start. This is not about conspiracy. This is about incentives and contracts. When promises and metal stop matching, price discovery breaks. The market is not boring. It is loading. Before I say anything else, I want you to lock onto one idea because it is the core of the whole thesis. A flat price can be more bullish than a rising price if you understand what is happening under the surface. A rising price can be driven by excitement. It can be driven by a stampede of leveraged money that disappears the moment the candle turns red. A flat price with persistent activity is different. It means price is trying to go down and failing. It means every attempt to push it lower gets absorbed. It means supply is being removed without allowing the market to reset lower. That is accumulation, and accumulation is what happens before a repricing. Now let us start with what you can see, because the first clue is hiding in plain sight. When a market is truly weak, it does not need to be forced down. It falls on its own. The bids disappear, every bounce is smaller, silver does something different. Silver keeps meeting a wall of demand the moment it dips into a very specific zone. It is not random. It is calm, disciplined, and relentless. This is what strategic buying looks like. A speculator chases, a speculator panics, a strategic buyer cares about quantity. They care about obtaining ounces without waking the market up. They buy a little on the dip, they buy a little on the next dip, they refresh the order, and they keep doing it until the supply is gone. If you have ever watched a market sit still while volume stays elevated, you have seen this movie. It is The Whale. The whale does not splash. The whale just displaces water. And if you want a simple visual, picture a dam. The water behind the dam is the demand for immediate metal. The dam itself is the paper system, the spreads, the roll incentives, the settlement games, all the tricks that keep the surface calm. When volume is heavy and price refuses to break, that water is rising. You do not know the exact moment the dam cracks, but you know something important. The pressure is increasing, not decreasing. So the first question is obvious. Who is the whale in silver right now? Who has the size, the patience, and the motive to keep absorbing supply while everyone else is bored and looking away? Most people immediately point to banks, because banks are the villains everyone knows. But banks do not usually defend a level like this on the buy side for weeks. Banks fade momentum and exploit leverage. They do not quietly accumulate a physical commodity unless they have a reason that goes beyond trading. Retail is also not the answer. Retail demand is real, but it is scattered. It does not create a smooth, methodical bid that absorbs every dip like a sponge. So if it is not banks and it is not retail, you are left with the group that actually uses silver, industry. And this is where the story stops being about charts and starts being about delivery. Industrial buyers do not think in terms of bragging rights. They think in terms of downtime. They think in terms of missing a contract because they cannot source a component. For them, a supply disruption is not a bad quarter, it is a broken business model. Now you might be thinking silver is jewelry and coins. Why would industry panic? Because silver is not just a precious metal. It is a critical metal. It is one of the best conductors we have, and it shows up everywhere. Electricity needs to move cleanly and reliably. And the world is building an infrastructure that is brutally electricity heavy. Data centers, grid upgrades, solar deployment, electrified transport, industrial automation. In that world, silver stops being a nice to have and starts being a bottleneck. That is why the whale matters. When the whale is industrial, the buying does not stop because the chart looks tired. It stops when the buyer believes their supply chain is safe. And if they are buying now, quietly, it means they do not feel safe. Now we move to the second part, which is where the fear really starts. Because even if you accept that there is a whale, that still does not explain why the price can stay pinned. If a monster is eating ounces every day, why does the chart not explode? The answer is the exit door. Most people think of COMEX as a place where you bet on price. But underneath the gambling, COMEX is a delivery mechanism. It is a system of contracts that, at least on paper, can end with physical settlement. Here is the basic problem. There are far more promises for silver than there is silver sitting around ready to be delivered. The system works as long as most people do not ask for the thing. It becomes fragile when more people do. When delivery pressure rises, the shorts need options. They need ways to fulfill obligations without panic buying physical metal in the open market. They need doors. One door is rolling the contract. Convince the long to delay delivery. Offer a spread. Offer a premium. Make time the product. Another door is cash settlement. Pay enough money that the long walks away and does not demand bars. Another door is the geography shuffle. Shift pressure between pools of inventory, between vault systems and jurisdictions, using instruments that transform one promise into another promise. As long as these doors stay open, the market can look calm even when it is under stress. The pressure does not show up as a screaming price. It shows up as friction. That friction has a language. Sometimes it shows up in the spread between months, where the market starts paying more for metal now than metal later. Sometimes it shows up in lease rates, where the cost of borrowing physical metal rises because nobody wants to lend it. Sometimes it shows up as backwardation, which sounds technical, but the idea is simple. The market starts pricing urgency. It starts pricing fear of not having the metal in hand. You do not need to memorize the terms. You just need to recognize the behavior. When the market pays up for now, the exit door is narrowing. Now here's the key point. When the exit door starts closing, the price can remain calm right up until the moment it cannot. Because the system will do everything it can to keep the panic inside the plumbing. So what does it mean when the exit door is closing? It means the relief valves are failing together. Rolling becomes harder because longs stand their ground. Cash settlement becomes more expensive because the premium to walk away goes up. And the geography shuffle becomes harder because the physical market is tighter and the metal does not move as freely as it used to. In a normal year, the world can paper over tightness with logistics. Pull bars from one vault, ship them to another, refine, recast, and keep the machine turning. But logistics is not free. Refiners have schedules. Fabricators have priority customers. Shipping has delays. Insurance has costs. And in a world where governments and strategic industries are paying attention to critical minerals, the assumption that metal will always be available to export, always be easy to source, starts to break down. That is how an exit door closes, not with a bang, with paperwork, delays, and a rising price for immediacy. This is where people miss the plot. Silver is global, but the supply chain is a pipeline, not a lake. When a pipeline gets kinked, it does not matter that metal exists somewhere else. What matters is whether it can reach the outlet on time, in the right form, in the right size, under the right rules. That is what COMEX delivery panic actually is. It is not a tweet, it is not a theory, it is a bottleneck. Now let us talk about the warehouse reality, because this is where the exit door gets misunderstood. There is metal that is eligible, meaning it meets specs, and it is stored in the warehouse system. And there is metal that is registered, meaning it is actually available for delivery against futures contracts. Eligible metal can become registered, but only if the owner chooses to make it deliverable. In calm times, that choice is easy. In tight times, that choice changes. Owners protect metal. They pull it back. They say no. So the headline inventory can look fine while the deliverable pile shrinks. That is another version of the exit door closing. The metal exists, but it is not for sale. Now we move to the third part, the word panic. Panic in a futures market does not look like people screaming on television. Panic looks like professionals realizing they cannot do the thing they promised. A COMEX short is not just an opinion about price. It is a promise that, if a long stands, you can produce metal. Most shorts never have to do it because most longs never stand, so the short becomes comfortable. But in a tight physical market, the long starts changing. The long notices that physical conditions are tightening even as the chart looks sleepy. The long notices that delivery demand is heavier than it should be. The long notices that the deliverable pile is not replenishing the way it used to. And then a critical thing happens. The long decides to stand, not to make a point, but to secure metal. When enough longs do that, shorts have to scramble for bars. And if the exit door is closing, the scramble is not a normal scramble. It is a scramble in a shrinking room. This is also where people misunderstand what a shortage looks like at first. It usually does not start with a sign that says "sold out." It starts with a quote on a screen that does not match the reality of getting metal delivered. It starts with delays, with fees, with strange requirements, with suddenly the thing you thought was liquid is not liquid. You can think of it as two markets running at once. There is the screen market, where you see a quote and you can click buy. Then there is the delivery market, where you try to secure specific bars in specific sizes delivered through specific channels on a specific timeline. When those two markets diverge, the screen market can stay calm while the delivery market is screaming. That divergence is exactly what creates the sudden repricing later, because eventually the screen has to catch up to the reality of the bottleneck. As the scramble intensifies, the system has two choices: let price rise and clear the market, or prevent price from rising and manage the damage quietly. History tells you what gets tried first. Quiet management. That is where margin hikes come from. That is where rule adjustments come from. That is where settlement incentives come from. Those are not causes. Those are symptoms of a system trying to buy time while the door narrows. Now I can already hear the objection. People have been talking about silver shortages forever, and the price is still here. So let me separate hype from signal in one simple way. The signal is not a headline about shortage. The signal is a specific combination of conditions that rarely happens unless the plumbing is under stress. You have a flat or capped price. You have persistent heavy activity around that price. You have rising friction in the physical market. And you have a delivery window where obligations concentrate and the system has to perform. This is also why specific windows matter. When a major delivery month approaches its key deadlines, when notices get issued, when warehouse stocks get shuffled, the system is forced to show its hand. You can hide stress in the off-season. You cannot hide stress when the contracts come due and real bars have to be allocated. That is when you see the telltale scramble, the sudden incentive to roll, the sudden talk about orderly markets, the sudden effort to keep the headline price from attracting attention. That is why I am saying, watch this week. Not because the universe cares about a calendar, but because delivery forces the system to reveal itself. The exit door either works or it does not. If it works, the price stays calm and the pressure gets pushed forward. If it does not, the price jumps. And the jump does not happen when everyone is ready. It happens when people are bored, convinced nothing will happen, and no longer watching. Now we arrive at the final part, which is what you watch for in real time. There are two broad scenarios. Scenario one is that the exit door is still open, but narrowing. In this scenario, you get more churn. You get sharper dips that get bought quickly. You get a market that feels compressed. The system finds metal, but it pays more for it in hidden ways. The headline price stays deceptively calm. Scenario two is that the exit door effectively shuts, at least temporarily. In this scenario, the market stops behaving like a normal market. The price does not climb smoothly, it gaps and sprints to find the next zone where supply actually exists. Above a long capped market, liquidity can be thin, so when the cap breaks, price moves fast through empty air. Now, what would you see if scenario two is starting? You would see delivery demand stay elevated even as the price refuses to break down. You would see the deliverable pile fail to replenish. You would see signs that the system is trying to convince longs to go away because it cannot comfortably meet the obligation. And you would likely see attempts to shake the tree, sudden drops designed to trigger fear, to run stops, to make people sell claims on metal before the claim becomes valuable. A real breakdown has continuation, a shakeout snaps back. So here's the checklist for this week. If you want it even more concrete, here are the kinds of things that change first when a delivery squeeze is forming. The front month starts acting stubborn, refusing to soften even when the broader market wobbles. The incentive to roll increases because time becomes valuable. The conversation shifts from price targets to availability to lead times to allocation. And the warehouse data starts looking strange, not necessarily collapsing in one day, but refusing to recover, as if every refill gets consumed immediately. And one more subtle tell, the news flow will often get quiet right before a move. That is not because nothing is happening. It is because the people who are doing the buying do not want you watching them do it. They prefer boredom. They prefer disbelief. They prefer a market that feels dead because it keeps the crowd away from the door while the door is still open. Watch whether dips keep getting instantly absorbed in the same zone, repeatedly. That is the signature of a whale. Watch delivery-related pressure. If delivery demand is heavy while price stays pinned, the plumbing is stressed. Watch the physical friction signals you can access, premiums, delays, and the behavior of spreads. When friction rises, the door narrows. Watch for violent drops that fail to follow through. That is often the market testing how many weak hands it can flush. And watch the psychology. When everyone starts saying silver is dead again, when the market feels like it is doing nothing, that is often when the move is being built. Now let me bring this back to the beginning. Most people wait for the explosion, and then they chase it. The smart money buys the boring part. They buy the part where you feel nothing. They buy the part where the price is pinned and the volume is heavy because they understand the boring part is the trap. The trap is for the crowd that thinks nothing is happening. The trap is for shorts who think there will always be an exit. The trap is for a system that thinks it can shuffle paper forever. COMEX delivery is where paper meets physics. When the exit door is open, physics can be delayed. When the exit door closes, physics shows up all at once. So this week, do not just watch the price. Watch the behavior. Watch the absorption. Watch the pressure building in the plumbing. Because if the exit door is closing, then what looks like a boring chart is actually the loudest warning you're going to get. The market is not calm. It is loading. And the only question that matters is simple. Are you positioned like the crowd, or are you positioned like the whale?